Oh, hey, I didn't realize you were there. I'm so glad that you're joining with us tonight for YouTube premiere of our lesson and then small groups. While you're here, I've got a couple of announcements for you. Make sure that you join us each and every Monday morning for the Monday Morning Show. We're going to go live on Instagram at 10 a.m. Make sure to join us, and we're going to be interviewing the Jenkins this week, so we're super pumped for that. Secondly, we're doing a Bible study that's going to reach out and go through every single day, and we're going to talk about that and get together, uplift one another, pray for one another. We're going to do that on Wednesdays on Zoom at 2 p.m. And lastly, we're going to be getting together, watching a movie on Netflix through a social media platform that we're still looking at, and we're going to be doing that at 2 p.m. This Friday. I have my mind in other places. So, 2 p.m. this Friday, join us, and we're going to go watch Netflix together, socially distanced, through the power of the internet. Hope to see ya. Bye. Okay guys, welcome to week 2 of our Daily Bread series. In the midst of COVID-19, we're talking about how we can pursue Jesus and follow him as we're in the midst of socially distancing and trying to figure out what COVID-19 is and even what the future holds. What is Jesus calling us to? And so this week, I've got something pretty amazing for you. We're going a little different because we've got a Daily Bread gluten-free edition just for the Newkirks. So, because I love you guys, I've got the gluten-free edition for you, just for you this week. So, we are in the midst of this talking about what it looks like to follow Jesus in the midst of all these times, and really that can bring up a ton of different questions. And I think the first question that it really starts to bring up is, where is God? Where is he? We're confused about why this is happening and what it means and what does that even mean for me, what the future is going to hold as we're trying to figure out what tomorrow is going to look like. And then on top of that, we've got people that are being impacted massively and families that are being impacted. We're having to stay at home, and so it's just creating this confusion. And as we're trying to figure out our place in that and what that looks like for us, it starts to bring about this question of, where is God in the midst of this global phenomenon? And so what I want to encourage us to do is that in this Daily Bread is that Jesus is calling us to follow him, to follow Jesus in the midst of some really difficult times. And this is what the series is all about. And as we're asking ourselves that question of where is God, it is starting to create some difficult things in our life. We're starting to see that COVID-19, like we're having to stay home, and so maybe that's creating some real difficulties for you. Maybe you're having to be with your family a little bit more, and now it's kind of starting to get a little bit more hurtful, or maybe it's just starting to stress you out now that you're with your family. Other points, we're having to stay home, so we feel pretty disconnected from everybody, and it starts to kind of play into this idea that we're starting to feel alone. And so that becomes that our confusion and trying to navigate this, really you can start to lead towards frustration. That we're getting frustrated over this whole situation. We want it just to end, and it's so hard not to even take that out on Jesus and our relationship with him. And what I want to encourage us to do, because God has placed you here in this moment for a specific reason and a specific purpose. God has you here on earth, sitting in your homes for a specific reason and a specific purpose. And so I don't think his goal is for you just to sit there being bored and waiting for all this to blow over. I think that God is calling you to do something much bigger and something much better than just waiting. And that is what we're going to talk about today. Is that how can we follow Jesus to make this more than just a time of waiting as we sit in our homes? When I was younger, and I had just graduated from college, and I was super excited for where God was leading me, where he was guiding me, and I had just answered yes into going into ministry, and I had pursued this degree with him. I started hitting some really difficult moments because as I graduated, I didn't get to go into ministry. I actually took a call center job, and it was super, super difficult for me. I struggled really within that because I didn't really like answering phone calls, and that frustration and the confusion of like, why am I here? Like I went into went into ministry, and now I'm in a call center. Like, God, where are you? And so it led to me being very frustrated and very confused. And I thought that maybe God had left me behind. That I had answered yes into his calling, and yet somehow he made a mistake because surely I wasn't supposed to be here. Surely I wasn't meant to be a call center agent. And so as I struggled within that, I would stay up really long and really late at night trying just to make my days longer so I didn't have to be going to work the next day. And so what Jesus started to do was to call in my life and to move something within my life that he did have a plan and he did have a purpose. And eventually I would go into ministry, but right now God placed me as a call center agent because he had a specific reason, a specific purpose, and a specific plan for me in that moment. And when I started taking that to heart and trusting that God had this plan, I started viewing my job a little bit differently, and I was able to build some great friendships. I was able to help others. And so God used me in this big way. And my question for you in the midst of COVID-19, it is, what is God's plan for you through this? What is God's plan for you through COVID-19? What is he guiding you to do in this time? Is his goal for you to grow closer with him? Is his goal for you to reach your friends? Is his goal for you to maybe impact your family? What is his purpose and his plan specifically for you during this time? And so we're going to be looking at Exodus 13 and 14 to really kind of answer these questions. In Exodus 13 and 14, last week we had looked into chapter 16, so we're backing it up a little bit, and Israel had just been freed from Egypt. Egypt had enslaved about 1 million people, this nation of Israel, and God had done some miraculous and amazing things to free his people. And now they kind of got to these questions of like, where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? And so God presses kind of pause on this as they're just freed and they're just out of Egypt. He says, look, I want you to remember this time and remember what I've done for you. And now here's where we're going to pay attention. Here's where our part is going to come into, is that God is saying that I have a plan and a purpose for you. Let's look at Exodus 13:17. His very first thing that he's wanting them to do. It says, when Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through the Philistine territory, even though that was the shortest route to the promised land. That's where God's leading and guiding his people, is to the promised land. He's not going to take them the shortest route. So God said, if the people are faced with a battle, they will change their minds and surely return to Egypt. God knew what would happen if his people had to face battle. And he knew that his plan and his purpose was something much higher and something much better than them running and returning back to being enslaved in Egypt. And so that means that every step of the way, every path that they would go down, every tree that they would go under, God was going to be very intentional to lead them, and that was going to be a part of his plan. And so for you, with every tinge and inkling of fear and maybe anxiety, and with you being even socially distanced from everybody, and if you're like me, every trip to the kitchen to get some ice cream, maybe God has a bigger and better plan than just us living in fear, than us just wasting our time and us just being bored. God has something that he wants us to accomplish in the midst of COVID-19. And I want you to know that you're a part of that plan. That God has you placed here at this moment in 2020 because he wants you to do something during this time. And I know we're going to struggle with that a little bit because just a couple short months ago when we were turning the new year and 2020 was going to be our year, this was going to be even our decade, our century that we were going to define and go down, we didn't picture this happening. We didn't think that in a couple short months we would all be forced into our homes, waiting for COVID-19 to essentially go and blow through. And now we find ourselves here. And what God is saying to you is that He has a plan. And it may not be the shortest path. It may not be what we pictured in our mind. It may not be the thing that we were hoping was going to happen. But God has a specific plan and reason for this happening. And it's up to us to fill that with trusting Him. That He has a plan for you during this time. And so if we keep going in this, in Exodus 14, this one chapter later, a couple verses down, God's going to call them to do something pretty amazing. So now He's redirected the nation of Israel, and now they're moving somewhere different, and He's actually got them placed really right in front of Israel, or in front of Egypt. And so He has got all of His people, about 1 million people, camping right where the Egyptian and pharaohs can see Him. And this is what it says in verse 4. He says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them. Then I will receive glory by my means of the Pharaoh and all of his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So God had His people face the people that enslaved him, had him face the people that made fun of them, that mocked them, that kept them enslaved. And He did it for two reasons. One, that He would get glory through that. Secondly, the people would know that He is God. And so He had a specific purpose for taking them and placing them where He did. Because even as we talked about just a minute ago, like as He's going to lead them to the promised land, He goes a very indirect route and really kind of backtracks a little bit so that they can get to where they're in front of Pharaoh. Because God has a purpose for where He's calling us to. And His purpose for you isn't for you to live in defeat, for you to live in fear, for you to live in anxiety. God has a purpose for you to live and experience the victory that Jesus has provided. So because in John 10:10 it says that Jesus has come that He can give us life. So God's purpose for you, we know at the very, very basic level of this, is that God is calling you to experience life. And that He has something specific for you, and there's a purpose behind why you're facing and going through the things you are right now. And it's for your good, because God didn't lead the people the shortest route, and He brought them back because He had a plan and a purpose, and it was for their good. So the question you have to ask yourself, if we're to pause, is what is God's goal for you? What's His purpose for you going through this? Let's see how the people respond later on in Exodus 14. So the Pharaoh see what's happening. He sees 1 million people camping just a couple miles away from him. He sees the smoke from their fires. He sees tents. He sees all these people gathered there. And he starts to get really, really frustrated. He gets super angry at them because he thought that maybe this whole thing was just a big fluke. That the nation of Israel somehow had tricked him, and now they had kind of embarrassed him in front of everybody else. And so he wanted his revenge, and he's going to come after him. And so now this is where we're picking up in the story. And before we go really any further, I want to give you a heads up. So God started guiding and directing His people by this pillar of cloud that was going to be in front of them during the day, and at night by a pillar of fire. And so at every moment, the people of Israel could see that God was with them, and not only that, but He's going before them. So that there wouldn't be these enemies or anybody that would attack them, that God Himself is marching before His people, protecting them and guiding them. And now He has guided them right in front of the Egyptians, and now the Egyptians are super upset, and they're going to come in and attack Him. And just to set this scene for you a little bit, the Egyptians are already on the attack. And they're coming, and they have about 600 chariots that they're going to be coming after them with. And that means that if you were in Israel, if you were with the people and you were there that day, you would see clouds of smoke coming up miles and miles away. It would be the dust that's picking up from the chariots as they're coming to kill you. the world's most powerful army is coming after you with the best of the best. And eventually you're going to see them a couple miles out, and you're going to be able to see them coming to attack you. And God has led you into this moment. Let's keep reading. It says, "Then the angel of God, who was going in front of the Israelites by the pillar of cloud, moved and went between them, between the Israelites and the Egyptians." So as the chariots are coming and they're getting ready to attack, this cloud comes in between them, and now they're separated. And the pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and stood behind them. So now it's between the Egyptians and the Israelites. And it came between the Egyptians and Israelite forces, and there was a cloud and darkness. It lit up the night, and neither group came near the other all night long. Could you imagine being in that moment? The most powerful nation in the whole world is coming after you. God has led you into this moment. And what are the feelings and emotions you must be feeling? What is going through your head at that time? But now God himself is protecting and guarding you. And so the Israelites had to fill that gap with, man, God's placed me in this situation. He's led me here. Now I'm going to be killed. There's all this situation is just screaming fear and anxiety, and it's creating this gap. And in the midst for you, like this COVID-19 and socially distancing and feeling alone and maybe feeling fear and anxiety and tensions in your house, maybe you feel completely alone right now because you're not able to see your friends. There's this void that's being created. And God has a plan and God has a purpose. But you have to ask yourself, like, what are you filling that void with? Are you filling that void with trust that God has this purpose and plan? Or is that fear and anxiety starting to creep in because you're not seeing God? And there's moments that really can suck the hope that we have. There's moments that can strike down all of our goals. And the storms that we face hit us and knock us over. Those aren't the times that we should give in. Those aren't the times that we should throw in the towel. It's not the times that we should be moving into despair. Because if we know that God has a plan, and if that God has a purpose, that means that God's with you in this moment. That God himself, the creator of the universe, the one that made you, the one that created you, the one that loves you, God has a plan and a purpose, and not only that, but he is personally with you, protecting and guiding you every step of the way. In the midst of this, in the midst of your trips to go get ice cream from your freezer, in the midst of you feeling fear, in the midst of you feeling some anxiety, in the midst of you feeling tension, that God is with you in those moments. That yes, he has a plan and a purpose, but it doesn't mean that he's distant from you. It doesn't mean that he doesn't care about you. It means that he himself is there guarding and protecting you. So God breaks into this situation so that we can see him. And I think that the goal that he has for each of us and the plan that he has for each of us, the number one thing is that we may see him all the more and grow closer to him. And so God has, this is part of his plan. This didn't catch him by surprise, and this isn't something that he wasn't hoping would happen, that all of this God allowed to happen. Secondly, that God has a purpose. His purpose is that you can know him, that you can experience the life that he brings. And that only happens when we stay in step with Jesus and follow him. And thirdly, that God's going to guide you and be with you in those moments. Let's see this as an opportunity for us to grow closer to him, not further away. Because God himself is guiding and directing your steps. But let us be intentional. Let me be intentional. Let you be intentional with this time. That we may grow and love and pursue him all the more. Not step back, but step into the situation knowing that God has a plan for you. That he has a purpose for you. That there's a goal for you. And that he is with you in the midst of that. And so this week, what I want to encourage you to do is, instead of stepping into that boredom and stepping in and being fearful and being anxious, maybe we should step into trusting God and leaning on Him all the more, and that is okay, and that is His goal for us. And let's see what He's got up His sleeves, because He's going to do something that only He can do, that's going to completely blow us away. All we have to do is to step into that. And He will ease us, and He will breathe life into us, and He will bring peace. And there will be something that we can't explain to other people, but we know that God's got this and that it's okay. Let's pray. Jesus, I thank You for this time together. I thank You for each and every student that's watching this. I thank You for what You're doing in their lives. God, help us to see You all the more. Help us to step into this fear, step into this void, and know that You have a plan and a purpose, and You're going to be with us as You guide us. Lord, we love You, and we ask that You bring us closer to You. And I ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right, guys. So like last week, we're going to be going into small groups through Zoom. So the description and the YouTube is going to be right down below. You're going to follow that link, and you're going to put in that code. And then I'll see you in a few short minutes. See you guys.